Once upon a time, there was a little boy who desperately needed love. But his father was too busy working to pay any attention to the boy, and his mother was too sad and too sick to give him the love that he needed. "When are you going to grow up?" said the boy's father as he was going over the bills, fretting about how he was going to keep up. How was he going to pay the additional medical expenses of the boy's mother? "All you do is play all day. Welcome to the real world where bills don't just pay themselves," said the boy's father as he held a doctor's bill in front of him. "You're only adding to these expenses. You'll never be good enough." The boy tearfully went to his mother and asked, "When are you going to get better?" The mother wiped away his tears and told him that she's doing everything in her power to get well, and she was promised by God that if she was very good, God will make her well. She told him to be good and pray for a miracle. She slowly sat up in bed, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and told him, "I love you to the moon and back. Do your best to help your father. He is very stressed." So the little boy thought. He thought and he thought and he thought and he thought, how can I help my father make enough money to make him happy and make my mother well? Then the little boy prayed. He prayed and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. "Please help me give my father enough money, and please help me make my mother well." The next day, the little boy went to school. The boy didn't like school. The other kids were mean to him because he was poor, unpopular, didn't get good grades, and they told him that he stinks. They would constantly pester him and bully him throughout the day, calling him names and making fun of his clothes and the way that he talked. The little boy came home exhausted and fell in front of the TV, working to mindlessly forget what happened at school. "How's my professional TV watcher?" the boy's father asked scoldingly as he came home from work. "Isn't it nice that you get to relax while I'm at work? Isn't it nice that you have the freedom to enjoy yourself?" The little boy went to his mother with tears in his eyes. She was very sick and rolled over in bed. She looked at his tears and coughed. "I am very sick. Please leave me alone. Help your father by going outside and, I don't know, pulling weeds or something." So the little boy left his mother alone. He went outside to pull weeds. Their land was wild and untamed, so the boy had a hard time knowing what weeds to focus on, but he found a tall, prickly one and began to yank it out of the ground. The prickles hurt his small hands, but he yanked and he yanked and he yanked until the weed snapped in half, causing him to fall back onto the ground. He looked up at the sky as dusk began to settle in, where he could see the tip of the moon already rising. He began to daydream for a moment of escaping to the moon, escaping from everyone and everything. He imagined using all of his energy from his small body to jump to the moon. If he could just jump to the moon, then everyone would accept him and love him for his ability to jump so far. If he could just jump to the moon, then maybe he could find some cool moon rocks and bring them back and sell them to make enough money to make his father happy and to make his mother well. If he jumped to the moon, perhaps he could jump to the stars and make amazing discoveries that would make the kids at school like him. So he stood up and looked at the moon, and he jumped as hard and as high as his little body could, about 6 inches. Then he came crashing down onto the weed and broke the other half of it, sticking out of the ground, and fell on his face. While on the ground, he said a small prayer. "Please, God, help me jump to the moon so that my mother can be well, so that my father can be happy, and so that I can have friends." He stood back up and he jumped again with similar results. He jumped and he jumped and he jumped and he jumped until his father came out and saw what he was doing. "What are you doing?" his father scowled. "Your mother asked you to come out here and pull weeds, and you're playing and jumping around. You'll never be good enough," he scorned. "Come inside for dinner." That night, as the boy laid in bed, he dreamed about how he might jump to the moon. He thought to himself, maybe if I get a little bit higher, I can make it to the moon. The next day, during recess at school, he thought how amazing it would be and how cool everyone would think he was if he could just jump to the moon in front of them. So he climbed to the top of the jungle gym, which was very high. Then he looked up at the sky and he jumped as high and as hard as he could, but instead he fell down onto the hard ground and broke his arm, while the kids around him scoffed and called him stupid. His father picked him up from school and was very angry with him. What were you thinking? We don't have the money for this. We don't have the money for more doctors. The little boy cried and winced in pain from his broken arm as his father yelled at him. Why would you do such a stupid thing? His father asked. The little boy cried and said, I don't know, as he dropped his head in shame. Your mother is sick and can't help you, and I don't have enough money for this, his father criticized as he drove him to the hospital. The little boy thought about what happened. He thought and he thought and he thought and he thought. He couldn't figure out why he couldn't jump to the moon. Then the little boy prayed and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. Didn't God want him to help his father have enough money? Didn't God want him to help his mother get well? Didn't God want him to have friends? The little boy decided that maybe he didn't have enough faith. So over the next few weeks, he prayed even harder, believing that God would give him the power to jump to the moon. Every night he prayed as he imagined himself jumping to the moon to get moon rocks to sell to give his father enough money and to make his mother well. He determined that he hadn't shown enough faith when he jumped from the top of the playground, and that next time he would have to find a place even higher to jump from to get to the moon. A month later, after praying every day and every night, the little boy climbed on the roof of his house. He looked down and saw that it was very far way down. He determined that this was close enough to the moon and would show enough faith that God would help him get to the moon. So he jumped as high and as hard as his little legs would lift him. The little boy flew through the air. He flew and he flew and he flew. He jumped so high that he was able to touch the moon with his fingertips. A few days later, he woke up in the hospital with a broken leg and a concussion. His mother was laying in bed next to his. Honey, you scared me. Why would you ever jump off of the roof? His mother coughed as he opened his eyes. The little boy thought for a second, noticing his body hurt all over. I was trying to jump to the moon to bring some moon rocks home. The little boy's father sneered as he was standing over their beds. He's clearly delusional. You've been hit too hard in the head, boy. You're bankrupting us with all these medical bills and you're killing your mother. The doctor better give you some good pills so that you can get right in the head. You'll never be good enough. A few days later, the little boy came home, but his mother did not. She died in the hospital. In his grief, the little boy's father turned to him and said, "You killed your mother when you jumped off that roof. You'll never be good enough." The little boy was shaken. He was trying to save his mother. He wondered if he didn't have enough faith. Years passed, and the little boy became a man. The doctors put him on some medicine to subdue his desire to jump to the moon and to help him cope with life, but still, he had dreams about jumping to the moon and to the stars where his mother now lived. The man eventually stopped taking the drugs and got married and had a child. The man found himself drowning in debt like his father, and found that his wife began to become sickly and angry about the debt. The man blamed his wife and his son for his financial problems and began dreaming about his childhood dream of escaping and jumping to the moon. He told his child that he would have plenty of money if it wasn't for him and his mother. He cruelly blamed them for his problems and for how expensive they are. He was tired of dealing with the constant criticism, now coming from his wife. He still had no friends and was unable to prove his value to the world. Though, try as he might, any effort he made to prove himself was met with the same scorn he dealt with as a child. He told his wife that one day he would jump to the stars and bring her more riches than she could ever imagine. She scoffed and told him that he was delusional and that he was so stuck in outer space that he was useless. He told her that she was mean and negative and holding him back from his dreams, and that one day he would prove himself to her. In spite of his wife, he continued to dream about jumping to the stars to see his mother and apologize to her for killing her and explain how he was trying to save her. He wanted to get away from all of the chaos and sadness and finally prove that he wasn't worthless. He wondered if he could jump from an even higher place. He could jump past the moon and reach the stars where his mother lived. If he was able to touch the moon by jumping from his roof as a child, as he remembered, maybe he could reach the stars if he jumped from a very high cliff. Then he could collect the rocks and other things from the stars and bring them home and sell them for money to prove his worth and make his wife happy. So the man thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought. Then the man prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed. He prayed for the faith to jump from a high cliff to reach the stars. Then a few months later, he climbed to the top of a very high cliff, and he jumped with every ounce of strength to reach the stars. He flew, and he flew, and he flew. He jumped so high that he landed on the stars where he met his mother, and they embraced. He sobbed as he told her that he didn't mean to kill her, while she comforted him. She explained, "You didn't kill me, but your father did. But now that you have come to see me, you can never go back to take your riches to your wife and your son."